Welcome to the Relationship Cycle with Jorge and Nelsa, where we discuss dating and other significant relationships.
Good evening, señorita.
Good evening, Poppy. We're back, and excited for this show. We've had some very interesting topics this last 2 seasons, and tonight is not going to be any different. Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you?
We already got the theme song for the promo.
Oh my gosh, Poppy. So when we talked about why do women pick bad boys, I had a conversation with a friend of mine though, so I have to be transparent. I don't think I've ever picked a bad boy, really.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, the more we talked about it, I was like, oh gosh, am I the bad girl? No, just kidding.
Well, my question to you would be, well, what's your definition of a bad boy, right?
Right. And I think that is definitely important. So when I was looking up, just why women pick bad boys in general, it says women who pick bad boys tend to be prioritizing short-term physical attraction over long-term emotional support. This may occur because they simply want to hook up without commitment. They may also be avoidant as far as their attachment styles and have difficulty trusting a partner, especially with greater emotional intimacy. But when I looked at like all the men that I had dated or whatever, from the time I got, allowed to court and whatnot back in the day, how we used to call it, going together, I could not pick one that like I was ashamed to have my parents meet or, didn't have a job really, or would be what I would consider just sort of a, Destiny's Child. What was the song? Um, where they just wanted a thug, I just, you know what I'm saying? I didn't really pick those types. I guess TLC got in my head with, I don't want no scrubs. So,
So Nelsa, let's start by saying this, that with this topic, there's a lot of layers to this.
Yes, I think so.
Like probably too many to cover in one podcast, but so I have a big affinity for psychology. So I always like to read interesting reads as it relates to psychology. And before I even started the podcast, I was still separated at the time. My boy Jose, who's a good friend of mine, he also reads a lot of psychology stuff. Anyways, he sent me an article once upon a time that really, it was a very big study that they did in Europe with women of all walks of life. And we're talking about waitresses, nurses, teachers, lawyers, like you name it.
Right.
So where I'm getting at is that profession and academic or educational merits and accomplishment don't play a factor in this, is what I'm saying.
I see that. I get that. Yeah.
So anyways, to get to the point, the bottom line, it was a very long read. However, bottom line, what it mentioned was that oftentimes when you present a woman with door number one, where you have the Ned Flanders guy, and then door number two, where you got the Jackson, the bike rider guy, right, with the tats and the bike and all that. Women often are going to be very intrigued by door number two. And a lot of it has to do with the maternal instincts of a woman, even women who don't desire children. Because when a woman sees a man who's considered a bad boy and an outlaw, there's a few factors, right? Number one, this dude rolls by the beat of his own drum, basically. So he doesn't really conform to all the society expectations.
Confident.
Okay?
That's what I would say is confident. Yeah.
But here's the right. I mean, they're definitely confident, or they're just comfortable in who they are and what they're
Mm-hmm.
about, right? Regardless of whether it rubs people the wrong way or not.
That's right.
Number two, they're not afraid to check your ass. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of women say that they don't like a man talking to them a certain way or checking them or whatnot, but I promise you, women do low key enjoy that when it's appropriate.
Right.
Um,
If you say so. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm just telling you. Listen, I'm not the one telling you this. I'm telling. These are people who are therapists. These are
Scientific,
people who are
scientific fact.
psychologists that have that know a hell of a lot more than what I do.
Uh-huh.
They have done some extensive studies as far as that. Hey, there is something to be said about telling a woman no, as it relates to romance, right? Um, Also, where the maternal instinct part kicks in is that when a woman sees a guy who's maybe innocent,
Mm-hmm.
very kind, very noble, compared to the Billy Badass kind of guy,
Mm-hmm.
there is something about that a woman feels that the man who is more seen more of a better protector
Yeah.
is also going to have a probability of a stronger sperm count. And therefore, for mating purposes, he looks like a more suitable
Mm-hmm.
mate than, say, your Steve Urkel run of the mill kind of guy.
Right. Like, can he even give me a good baby, and then can he protect me and my baby? I get that.
So even though, listen, and again, I want to emphasize that even if it's a woman who has decided along the line that, hey, I don't want any children, I have zero
Mhm.
desire for children, even then, there's something
Yeah.
subconsciously speaking that
Hardwired.
a woman sees a guy who's kind of like his own man, kind of does his own thing, kind of doesn't care what society thinks and what the norms are expected of him. They feel deep down inside that he is a better mate for offspring purposes.
Yes, and I get that because a lot of times our hardwiring is what we're getting at there. So I totally can see that being relevant. Um, and you know, a real factor because sometimes I think you are attracted to people for things subconsciously,
Absolutely.
and even on a primal level. That's what we're talking about, like a primal level. You're attracted to somebody, not necessarily in your um well, your prefrontal cortex, where you make decisions. That stuff comes from somewhere really low down inside of you. So I get that. And that confidence issue, going back to that just a little bit, it's almost like when you look at somebody who carries themselves with, I don't care, I don't give a shit about people's opinions. I don't really live my life according to the rules of everybody else. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, I never really went out with those guys, but I can't say that I wasn't attracted to those guys, especially even in, like, high school or junior high or whatever, because they always seem to have the confidence to step to me um without feeling fearful. Now, I think they always thought I was a nerd or, too much of a good girl at that point. And, I didn't really get those numbers, and, they didn't holler at me on a consistent basis as far as being boyfriends.
Right.
But um, they did turn my eye and they did make me smile. They could catch a dimple or two. Cause again, it's something about that flair, that confidence. Now, bad boys in terms of abusive or somebody who treats you um less than respectful and that kind of thing, that to me is not that's not attractive. Like, I have never really gone for guys who were very braggadocious or arrogant, or like in that term of bad boy. eh, not for me. But now I do love some tats, I'm not
But here's the thing, tats to me, because I've met people who are tatted up and they can be the nicest people in the world. So to
yeah.
me, That's more surface level stuff. But
Yeah.
I get that there's a lot of cultures that associate tattoos
Mhm.
to being a badass or being an outlaw or whatever. But now I feel like we've reached the point in society where, hell,
Yeah.
you got preachers rocking tattoos now.
I
Um,
tattoos. Yeah, I love mine. So, no harm, no foul there for me. But I know there are people who do consider that. But again, looking at psychology, since you brought it up, that was one of the things too. It says in this, what's this one? This is brightside.me. It says these wicked boys wouldn't have the power to attract girls if their level of confidence was low. Um, so again, there's something to that word confident. Also, it says that science says when a woman is in her ovulation stage, her hormones influence who she sees as a great father figure for her future children. Near ovulation time, girls are attracted to good looking, charismatic, and rebellious boys. And that's a scientific thing, why the male birds tend to have the bright plumes and the bright colors to attract the females. Like that's just nature. You know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
maybe that's a part of the nature's makeup for us to be attracted to those. Um,
I mean, this plays roles even in the animal kingdom, not
yeah.
just humans. Even in the animal kingdom, there's a
Hmm.
lot of these correlations that go with that. Another thing that I wanted to touch on. Let me ask you something else. You know who Superman is, right?
Uh huh.
Do you think he's a badass?
No, I wouldn't consider Superman a bad. He is, but I wouldn't consider him like a bad boy.
Well, a lot of, let's just say, a lot of ladies think he's pretty cool, right? But hey, the dude
Right.
can fly. He can see
Yeah.
through walls.
Right.
Um,
Well, he
so
makes
I'm
what?
gonna give you I'm gonna
Yeah.
give you an example. If you know anything about the whole Superman character,
Hmm.
so Clark Kent
Right.
works with Lois, right?
Right.
When they're coworkers
She
and
never.
Clark is just sitting there hanging out and working and doing his newspaper business,
Mm,
Lewis doesn't pay that man any damn attention. And he is the nicest, polite man at the workplace when they're working. Am I right or am I wrong?
you're right. You're
But
right.
when that dude
Terrible.
puts on that motherfucking cape and he starts whooping ass and taking names and saving the world,
Yes.
every woman notices who that man is because
Yeah.
he's a bad man.
You're right. You're right.
So that, and it's the same guy, the same physical attributes, except in one version of him, he's quiet, not bodacious, not loud, not rambunctious, low key, off the grid, polite. Not many women notice him in the workplace.
You're
When he
right.
when he goes into that phone booth though, and you see that cape and those red drawers, you know it's game time.
So, ladies, basically, what Poppy is saying is that you are letting a bad boy walk right by you every day in the office, and you don't even know it because he isn't dressed to make you see him. You got to dig deeper. We got to dig deeper. So, I love that because how many men are out there who would provide, who would be faithful, who would be loyal. There are movies all the time, especially like the little teen rom-coms where the girl never wants to pick the guy that's her science partner. She's always going for the jock in the first of the movie. But before it's
The
over,
quarterback, always picking the quarterback, always
the
picking.
nerd wins in the end sometimes. So, um, you know, it's just like, how do you rewire though? Like, how do you rewire what nature has seemingly, if we believe science all the way, put inside of us to pick like the ones who look and act a certain way?
So I did a little research and um, I saw somebody mention, it was a lady who I was listening to her video as she kind of divulged some things about past abusive relationships that she's had, and she said everyone should experience one toxic relationship in their life.
Mm-hmm.
She said so that you can learn from it, so that you can realize what toxic looks like,
Mm-hmm.
And then that way you have something to compare to when you do have a good relationship.
Okay. Okay. That makes
But
sense.
she said,
Don't know
but
if
she
you don't.
said, but hear me out. But when she
Uh-huh.
says, if you're getting the 2, 3, 4, 5 toxic bad relationships,
Mm-hmm.
okay, there's a problem. Like there's a trend, there's a pattern, there's some trauma bonding, there's some issues there where you're like, hey, you
Mm-hmm.
keep gravitating to these gangsters, and you need to get to the bottom of that. Because like I told somebody on Facebook that replied back to me about that post where she was like, she was basically saying I'm guilty, that she's all about bad boys. And I told her, sweetheart, I said, the thing with that is that bad boy fantasies only work out in movies and in TV shows. But in real life, you can take a kid out the ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto out of a kid.
Right. So there are some very, like you said, codependent behavior. Some, one of the articles I read also talked about, we're sometimes attracted to those men who are emotionally unavailable. We've talked about this with parent issues.
Absolutely.
If you've got stuff going on in your own life, then you're trying to work it out through this relationship. I have done that. Again, I still wouldn't call those men bad boys, certainly, but I did try to work through some of my own stuff with people that were not emotionally available all the time. So I think a lot of times relationships are practice fields for us, emotionally, with our own selves. We attract people that are either not like us, that we want to live vicariously through, or we want to work out some of our struggles from our past with this person in front of us. But I totally agree. If you keep seeing the pattern that this is the only type that you seem to be attracted to, you probably need to go and see one of the therapists that we've had on the show, or find
Absolutely.
someone who's good, because you really are putting yourself at the bottom of the heap all the time. You already know what the outcome's going to be. You've just changed names. The role is the same, and all you're doing is changing names for somebody who is going to treat you like the other ones have. And typically, men with those kind of emotional distances, or they only want to have a good time with you. Like, if you think you're going to change that person, you're not. The only person you really can change is you. One of the things that I was reading this article. Let me give you the name of the Elizabeth Stone. So it's online in thoughtcatalog.com.
Okay.
He says, there are reasons that the bad boys are addictive. We've talked about confidence, sexual attraction. Uh, some people are addicted to dating drama, so they're attracted to them. But she talks about, how do you stop? And she says, sharpen your bullshit detector. Uh, you
I
know,
love it. Oh my
There's some
God.
red flags, girls. Y'all not looking at him just because he is Mr. Sex Bomb. She says, listen to your intuition. Stop looking for these grand gestures, because if they're not consistent on a daily basis, and it takes like 10 drop dates, drop calls, never shows up, but he finally shows up with his Harley and wants to take you to the mountains for a weekend getaway, and the sex is so great, but then you never hear from him again for 2, 3 weeks. Stop it. Stop it. She says, choose compatibility over chemistry.
Ooh.
Um, and I think this is something we really need to do a show on this, because I have had some men to say that to me as well, and especially when I was first in the dating game, getting online. I had one guy who really turned out to be a great friend, who said, "Why do women always think chemistry is the most important thing?" I was like,
Because women are emotional creatures.
well, I think chemistry is just important. Like, I don't want to be friends with my lover only. We just gonna be friends if we're friends, right? I think chemistry.
Hey, they say friendships love caught on fire.
Well, I think chemistry has to be a part of an ongoing relationship for me. For me, but I have grown into the idea of compatibility, where we have things in common. We have common goals that we want to work toward. Like, we need to be on the same page about certain things, or at least the direction we're going in. Not think alike necessarily, but it can't just be, we got a great time. with chemistry, and physical attraction is so wonderful. But then I don't have anything that's in common spiritually. Like you don't even believe in God, or you don't even, think that love is important, or marriage, or whatever else is important that I think is important. So I'm really valuing that more and more.
So I
Um,
think I do want to say this
mhm,
as it relates to this topic. So I was listening to this lady. Her name is Dr. Walsh. So she has like a YouTube channel,
mhm,
and she kind of elaborated on why are women so enamored with bad boys. And she made an analogy that really stood out to me and really makes a lot of sense. She said that it is the same concept that Vegas uses with their slot machines, that bad boys are walking human slot machines, that you press that lever and you don't know what you're going to get. So
mhm,
the excitement, the anticipation, the spontaneity, the potential what if scenarios really can drive a person or a woman crazy as it relates to that from a romantic standpoint, compared to, you know, this, I mean, you've been married for a long time, when things start to get repetitive,
mhm.
dull, stale, boring, that is the fire extinguisher of a relationship
Yes.
if you're not careful. So bad boys have a tendency to be unpredictable, to be
Mhm.
spontaneous, to be kind of all over the place. And for women who tend to be, for the most part, emotional creatures, that creates a lot of spikes. And those spikes becomes memory, and that forms
Yep.
memories,
Yep.
and that forms attraction, compared to a guy who you meet, who you know, hey, he's going to take me to dinner, he's going to take my coat, he's going to do this and the other, and we're going to go home and watch a movie. Like, you already know exactly every move he's going to
Mhm.
do before you even get in the car for the date.
Yes.
So when a bad boy pulls up on his bike and he's like, hey, hop on and I'm going to take you somewhere you've never been, you're like, ooh, we got an adventure on our hands.
Yes.
And then, like you just said, and then he goes MIA, you're left like a crack fiend wanting more.
Yeah.
And you're like, how come he's not, that's kind of
Mhm.
the bad boys and the fuck boys. They're kind of like, in the same bracket.
Yes, absolutely. And everybody always likes to say there's a time and a place for everything. That's what my grandma used to say when I was growing up.
There is. I say that all the
So
time. There's a
I
time and
can't
place for everything. Absolutely.
say that look, I can't say that there's not a time and a place for a bad boy in your life. But I don't think that is your long term goal if you really want a relationship that's gonna have some, you know, value. It's going to feed your soul. And then, in the same article, she talks about love doesn't equal drama and pain. And so if you're not looking to be cycling around, with heartbreak and crying to your friends and your mama all the time about why he won't do right, I was just like, okay, like in Baby Boy, right? Jody. Jody was such a bad boy. Oh my gosh. But she just kept on and kept on and kept on. But you know what? I'm like, if you're going to end up, this is what I say to anybody, if you want a bad boy, that's your business. But don't tell me about it when he comes here breaking your heart over and over again, because I won't hear that mess.
Or
You
breaking
knew what,
something else.
or breaking something else. You knew what you were getting into. So sit over and be quiet until you get your mind right and decide that you want something different for yourself.
Listen, I've had some of my friends that I'm like, look, I told you since day one that dude was a fuck boy. So don't
Yeah.
don't come over here with
I,
those sob stories, because I'm not here to listen for that. Because I told
I
you
got no sympathy.
that dude is a fuck boy, and as long as you keep your emotions in check and you just trying to have a good time, everything's gonna be peaches and cream. Now, once you start getting these fantasy ideas, and once you start thinking that, hey, I want to bring him to the family cookout, or I want him to meet my mom and dad, or whatever, that's when you're going to be disappointed, because he ain't about that life, and that's not what he brings to the table. Well, same concept with bad boys, right? Like, normally they kind of do their own thing. They're very anti, committal as it relates to long-term relationships, but women still, try to persuade, try to change, and
Mhm.
try to figure out a way to, you know, persuade and change their mind. And obviously that's a uphill battle, man. But
Right.
the emotional roller coaster that they bring can be very enticing to a woman.
Mhm.
And another piece that I saw about this was from Dr. Walsh. She's on YouTube. And she mentioned that there are studies out there that psychopaths have figured out a way
Mm.
to mimic a confident man.
Yeah.
So because they know how to mimic a confident man, young women tend to be more at risk for landing on the hands of a psychopath compared to an older woman as it relates to like a, getting close to each other, because older women have already seen some of the signs and they're like, this
Yeah.
this is a fugazi.
Right.
While when a young woman is like, oh, he's being confident, and obviously a lot of women, equate that to being competent per her words.
Yes.
So they associate that as being, hey, this is a good man or this is a solid guy, when in reality, it's part of the game so
Mhm.
that he can earn your trust. And then obviously we know what happens when you're dealing with psychopaths, that they
Right.
tend to, be, serial killers or dangerous.
Or even at soft best narcissists that you end up with.
Oh, all that stuff, Cora. And if you look, I had a conversation with friends the other day. There's all these guys that have been serial killers that have a huge fan following of women.
Mm.
Like, I'm not joking. I watch a lot of these crime documentaries.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys that are serving hard time, that have been, notorious serial killers and psychos and all that. These guys literally get dozens of fans that are
Mhm.
female, that are very attracted to them for obviously the whole
Mm.
crazy, weird, psycho bad boy vibe that they give.
Wow.
Even then,
Can-
even knowing what
Yeah.
they've done.
Yeah. The charisma. Like a lot of them just
They're
are
charming. They're charming.
so
They
yes.
control a room. They know how to sweet talk you.
Right. And that's again the same article by Elizabeth Stone. She has some really good advice here. She was like, take a wait and see approach. Don't commit, jump into anything, or declare any dude the one in the first few months of being together. Bad boys and psychos, like you just said, will either be totally glib about commitment and refuse seriously, or they'll push for it right away to tie you down and obligate you to stick around. Obviously, neither is a recipe for success. She says, time is your ally. You'll learn everything you need to know if you sit back and pay attention without doing anything permanent. I think that's really great advice. I don't always take it. But I'm not one that when I start feeling the signs that things are off, you know, you're not gonna have to try to um talk me out the room. I'm already gone. But tell you right,
You've already excused yourself.
yes, I'll be stage right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You can
You hit them with the
autograph.
SpongeBob meme. I'm gonna head on out.
Yes, you stand there talking if you want to. I'm gone. But for some women though, who don't know how to listen to that inner intuition, it's like, girl, how many signs did you need? Like in horror movies, it's just like, oh my God, first the music, now the trail of blood from the garage to the house, like the knife in his hand. What else do you need to see? Stop, just stop. Quit.
Well, listen,
Self-
listen. We've talked about this, Nelson. Trying to reason with somebody in love or somebody who has strong feelings for somebody.
it's
Shit,
difficult. It's difficult.
you're not you're talking to a drunk person at
Hey,
that point.
hey, you trying to take a bottle from a hungry baby?
Is that like a Shelby saying? What is that? That sounds like a dirty South saying. I've never heard
Hey,
of that, but that's really
that's a
good.
Nelson thing, because I'm just like,
Oh,
as
okay.
a mother, you try to take a bottle out of a baby's hand when they're hungry, honey. You're gonna have a fight on your hands, and I'm just like this. That's really how a lot of people are when it comes to this whole, attracted to the wrong person thing, or somebody who's really not good for you. It's just like you don't want to take the you don't want to go cold turkey. They don't want to stop. They want to find every reason, every excuse. But you know, again, when you find yourself alienated and isolated and crying all the time over somebody, I got a friend, and just a wonderful person,
Right.
and has really had, really strong feelings for someone who I don't think really values her. And it's taken months for her to get done, really years probably, but you know, but she was just like, I can't right now. I can't right now. That was her thing. She was like, she knew that it wasn't good for her, that she wasn't getting what she deserved, but it was feeding something she needed at the time, and she really openly admitted that. But there were some things that kept happening, and what I saw was the more she started pouring into herself, the more she started working on her life, the more she started having um confidence in her lovability, if you will, then the less she would take the crumbs he was offering her. And really, like, when somebody just they breadcrumb you with it,
Oh, absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
that's a whole show right there, breadcrumbing.
Oh, yeah.
Um, she was allowing him to breadcrumb her until, I think, he lied or did something that just really kind of set her off finally. And but the feelings haven't gone anywhere though, because that's the thing. Like, when you get feelings for somebody, it becomes so difficult to not feel it anymore. Um or to feel it in such a degree where you can move on finally. And so
And there's also the human element, right? Where
yeah,
we crave what we can't really have.
yes,
The forbidden fruit, so to
yes,
speak.
absolutely. So
Or when you tell
yeah,
somebody, hey, you see that red button there? Do not push that under any
right. Like,
circumstance. You might as well tell them, hey, go push that button. And they'll probably be like, nah, I'm good.
right. So, and that's the thing. I was just like, when we finally believe in ourselves that we deserve better, or we deserve something that lines up with who we are, then that's when we start moving toward that. But, ladies, gentlemen, because there's some men out there look for bad boys and bad girls too, but don't don't spend the best of your years wasting it on somebody who does not give a shit about you. They're using you because they know you got the hots for them, and it feeds their ego. It feeds their, you know, just, I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's good for them, but what are you getting out of that? Like, what is in it for you besides those, stolen moments, if you will?
And the thing about that is you're wasting your youth on somebody you have no business wasting your youth, and then you're gonna get old and bitter, and then you're gonna be like, damn, I should have focused my energy and my attention on somebody that really wanted me for me, you
Right.
know?
But I
So
will,
you
it's
better wake up, because if you waste those precious years, time is irreplaceable. Time is
yeah, can't
one
get
of
it
the
back.
biggest commodities that we have in this world.
And can't get it back. But, not to be judgmental about it. If you are out there with a bad boy or bad girl, have fun. Okay? Have fun. Have fun. Enjoy. But just don't get your heart all twisted up in that. And when it's time to hit the eject button, get on off the ride. Okay? Get on off the ride. Don't keep going around the merry-go-round or the twirl a whirl. And then when you can't breathe good and you got high blood pressure and you don't know what's wrong with you, you don't know what happened. You stayed on the ride too long. That's what happened.
I think, just to kind of recap and wrap up the conversation, I think it's important to ask yourself as a woman, right? Why am I so drawn to these kind of men? Like men that are, considered forbidden for whatever reason, right? Whether he's a drug dealer, or whether he's a gangster, or whether he's, you know, I don't know, just got out of Rikers or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
why am I drawn to these men is the question that you need to address, so that you can really get to the bottom of some of these underlining issues that keep having you gravitate
Mm-hmm.
to these situations. Because I have a lot of women that, we have conversations about this kind of stuff all the time. And I always say, well, you picked them, so you got to take some of the blame too now.
Absolutely.
Like, the bad boy didn't just come and move in by himself.
No.
You opened up, you said, hey, here I am, take everything you want. I'm gonna blindly follow you. Like, you got to take some accountability, and you got to be like, hey, I let this toxic person, and men too, right? Because I've seen men in toxic relationships with some
Absolutely.
shady, questionable women as well.
Yes.
And so that's a show in itself too, right? Where men need to be careful as well, with those kind of women as well. But I think it's important to know the motives, and I think that will help you be more mindful when you see these red flags early on, because if you catch it early, you can at least save yourself a ton of time, because time, like we said, is one of our biggest commodities that life has to
Mhm.
offer. Because if you waste 5, 6 years on somebody and you're just a hamster in the wheel, where are you going with that?
Yes, yes, and that's, we've laughed a lot about this topic because there's some funny things out here in the world, and I just have a sense of humor about everything, really.
Oh, listen, laughter is the
True,
best medicine, no doubt.
yeah, truly, and honestly, I don't know that I've seen women after the first, let's say the first 30 days, the women that I knew who really loved bad boys, they don't really laugh anymore. They're always crying. Um, if they do get a good day, it's like an oasis in the middle of a desert. It's rare. It's,
Far few in between.
few and far between. Absolutely. So, again, if that's you, if these things fit who you are and you're listening to the show, please, please get some help. And I mean that because you deserve more, you deserve better, you deserve real love, real companionship, a real a person who will love you and honor you and be there for you, not just show you a good time once every blue moon and then it's hell on wheels the rest of the way. So,
And there's been cases too, Nelson, where when you get yourself wrapped up with somebody who's shady, right, who's a
mhm,
quote unquote bad boy, then you're putting yourself at risk for being at the wrong place at the wrong time, you know? And like we said, right, earlier in the show, a lot of these bad dudes, they don't make it to, a prosperous long life. Like, it's a short span. When you're living the fast life, you married to the streets. The streets are unkind, and you're not going to make it to 50. You're not going to make it to
yeah,
being old and gray and holding grandchildren and all that shit. Like, you
yeah,
kiss that goodbye. That only happens in movies and hit series. Hell, even in hit series, Walter White dies.
right,
So
right,
Scarface, he died.
yep,
Frank Lucas, he had a bad ending. Like, I'm just saying, like,
yeah,
these scenarios, like, you need to stop and think, okay,
mm,
if I marry this gangster or this, this dude who's bad news, like, what's my future gonna look like? What do we have? Do we have a realistic path to a family dynamic that I want, that I'm seeking from this man?
yes. Now, Jane Austen does say that there is no man who loves like a reformed rake, a reformed bad. You might like somebody that was out there in the streets, but he came on out. Now that's different. But
Right.
he needs to have his ass out the streets though before you try to. He needs to get himself reformed, and you can't do that. That is not your job to change a person. When he comes in and knows that I'm tired of living like this, I'm ready to get myself together and settle down and have a good woman, have a good life, then that's a different, you know,
That's a different vibe. Whole different vibe.
that is. So we're gonna put that out there too, because I want to make sure you know. I'm not saying that a bad boy cannot be lovable and loving, but he needs to have really gotten his priorities together and changed life for himself. And he doesn't need to be asking you to be his peace and you to be his um reason for doing whatever he needs to do to get himself together. That's too much responsibility. And I hate when people say that. Like, I think that's the new thing that people like to say that makes women think they being romantic. No, you need to be your peace. I'm going to come with peace. I'm not trying to be a difficult woman for you, but you need to have your shit together when you step to me. And that means have your life on point, get your therapy, get your healing. And then when we come together, 2 100s makes a real badass team. How about that?
Ooh, I like that. Power couples. Hello.
Hello, not 50-50, honey. We're going 100-100 all day, every day.
But
So,
listen,
this
this
is
was a
a
good
great topic.
podcast, good conversation. I think that we probably were long overdue for this, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a thing. I encourage people, do your homework, check out, some of these articles that are out there. There is extensive studies on this. This is not something new. This phenomenon has been going on for years, for centuries.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
definitely something to this. So I highly encourage people, do your own research, educate yourself, and find out your why.
Love it. Love it. Stay safe in these streets, people. We love you. Thank you for listening. Make sure that you check us out on YouTube at The Relationship Cycle. Check us out on web, www.therelationshipcycle.com. And give us your feedback. Spotify asked you to rate us. We love getting feedback from our audience. Check us out at Jorge Medina or Nelsa Weber on Facebook. And let us know what you want to talk about, what you want to hear about. What sort of topics are interesting for you in this dating cycle that you might find yourself in, or relationship cycle, whatever it may be, because we are open for ideas, and we are still looking for people who would love to host with us for one of our episodes. So jump right in there with us and let us know what your thoughts are. We'd love to hear them.
Buenas noches, good people. Thanks for joining us today on The Relationship Cycle with Jorge and Nelsa. Do you have show ideas? Email us at jorgeandnelsa@gmail.com.